Well, we have a number of members of Congress working on this issue, and one of them is Senator Orrin Hatch, who will be joining us in just a moment. But I want you to take a look at what he had to say about this on the floor of the United States Senate today.
This administration seems to take its cues from the far left, whether they represent the aspiration and hopes of ordinary Americans or not. Nowhere is this disconnection from the American people on better display than with the ham-fisted decision by Secretary Kathleen Sebelius and the Department of Health and Human Services to require that religious persons and institutions violate their most cherished beliefs or face the consequences. Late last year, HHS ordered all employers, including religious institutions, to cover in their employer insurance plans such things as sterilization, contraception, and abortion-inducing drugs and devices. With very limited exceptions, various hospitals, universities, and charitable institutions would face the choice of dropping coverage for their employees or violating their consciences.
Senator Hatch will be joining us here momentarily. One of the questions is, how do we overturn this? How could we hold government accountable regarding the legislation they pass and keeping the separation of church and state in all areas, not just when it's convenient to do so? Well, part of that is a legislative remedy, as Dr. Smith was just talking about. We're working on a couple pieces of legislation. We're working in the Senate with Blunt, who is working on a piece of legislation to get that through immediately, and Jeff Fortenberry in the House as well, that would protect conscience rights, not just based on religion, but as we were talking about earlier with Deidre, about many Americans have concerns about whether they're based in religion or just moral convictions, and those should be protected as well. So those are two pieces of legislation. We're going to have information for you in just a moment, how you can contact your members of Congress. In fact, I think we might have that slide now, where you can go to the website, frcaction.org, follow the links to send a message to your members of Congress, and ask them to sign on in the House to Jeff Fortenberry's bill, which would, it's the Conscience Rights Protection Act. And then in the Senate, we have Senator Roy Blunt has a measure as well that protects conscience rights. I encourage you to contact your senators to contact that, to sign on to that. Now we're going to let me give you that website again where you can send your questions. We'll put that up on the screen. You go to FRC Action, questions at frcaction.org. Well, joining me now is the Senator himself, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, who has served a very long, distinguished career here in Washington, D.C., defending these very issues that we're talking about. In fact, Senator, you wrote a letter to Kathleen Sebelius just a few months ago where 26 of your colleagues, I think it was, signed on to this, raising this very issue.
Yeah, we did, because we could see it coming. You know, this administration is so committed to liberal causes, and especially abortion, and telling people what they can and cannot do. That's typical of the far left, and you can't be any more far left than this administration is.
Well, and again, you're not a newcomer to this issue, because you raised this issue back during the committee hearings on the health care.
Right.
I remember you had an exchange with Barbara Mikulski about the abortion funding that was in this, and including Planned Parenthood. But this comes down to an issue of religious freedom. I mean, this really crosses the line.
That's the issue. That's the issue. Look, I'm the author of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, that bill was found unconstitutional with regard to its applicability to the states, but it's still a very solid bill with regard to the federal government, because we were concerned about these type of things, people coming in and just taking over and forcing religions to do things that really happen to be against their conscience. And in this particular case, it's a perfect illustration of how far they've gone. I'm also the author of the Religious Liberty Protection Act, which made it so that you can't discriminate against religions when they build churches and so forth. I have to say, this administration is really out of line.
Is this an overreach that the American people will push back on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, even those who believe in contraception and who believe in abortion, a high percentage of them are really offended when you start telling churches what they can believe. When you start telling them that government supersedes what the churches right of conscience really is. And in this particular case, look, we know that contraception is probably accepted by a lot of people, a lot of Catholics for that matter. On the other hand, these very same Catholics don't want their church shoved around. I don't want mine shoved around, or any other church shoved around. I've fought very strongly for religious freedom, and it's one of the most important protected concepts in our Constitution. The First Amendment is there.
That's why we call it a first freedom. Everything else stands and rests upon that very freedom.
It's what makes America great. It's what's made us the greatest country in the world, where people can come here and worship the way they want to, and be free in so many other ways as well.
This issue, as you mentioned, is most identified when you talk about contraceptive issues. It's identified with the Catholic Church. But Protestants are actually more opposed to this policy because they see it as that religious freedom issue. It's not a Republican issue, not a Democratic issue. This is a freedom issue, as you point out. What are you hearing from some of your Democratic colleagues?
Well, this is more than contraception. This is allowing the government to provide abortifacients as well.
You're correct.
I mean, look, we all know that Planned Parenthood does 400,000 abortions a year or more, and yet that's supported by the federal government. Now, they claim that money isn't, they don't use federal funds. Well, about 95% of all they do, from what I understand, is abortion.
Correct.
And yet you have all these liberal women who want to keep that abortion mill going, arguing that this is the way to go. And I think that's why the president caved in. Of course, I think he personally believes in abortion. I think he personally believes that people just have no knowledge of how to take care of themselves, and government has to help them to take care of themselves, and government has to tell them what to do. Bull. We conservatives don't agree with that, and an awful lot of liberals don't agree with that as well. When it comes down to religious freedom, this country is unique in the world because we really, really back up religious freedom. And that was one reason why we did the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. We shouldn't have had to do that, but we were headed down this road and we wanted to stop it. And here we are again with a liberal president, with a liberal White House, where one or two people said, gee, don't do this, this is going to be a big issue. And they just ignored them and went ahead thinking that the vast majority of people in this country really could care less. Well, they're finding that it's well over 90% who do care, even those who might agree with them on even abortion and contraception.
Will the White House voluntarily reverse this decision, or is it going to take Congress pushing the change?
I think the White House will have to change this. I saw where David Axelrod got panic-stricken that he knew they'd pushed the button way too far, which is typical of this administration. I mean, this isn't the only thing that they do that's really out of line and in contradistinction to the Constitution of the United States. But this has caused such an uproar, and they're really shocked to find that even those who agree with them on these issues don't want churches pushed around. They don't want church people being told what they can or cannot do by the government. And they sure as heck don't want the government to tell them that they've got to go contrary to their own personal consciences.
You know, and that's a fundamental difference when you look at what this president himself has actually said about he supports the freedom of worship. That is drastically different from what the Constitution guarantees us as a freedom of religion.
Right. There's a lot of difference there. I mean, we all support people to be able to worship in accordance with their own conscience and their own feelings, but we're talking about religion as a whole, and that includes every religion, not just the Christian religion. It includes the Jewish faith and the Muslim, Islamic faith, and other faiths as well that are sincerely followed. And I've got to say that every time these liberals try to push government off on us, they get in trouble. And this is one where they're in deep trouble unless they change it. So I suspect that this president's going to want to get out of this situation, because if he doesn't, we're going to have to pass legislation that says, keep your mitts off of religion.
How can people make a difference in this?
Well, I think, look, this may sound partisan, but I actually think we've got to change the administration. They have been trying to do these type of things ever since President Obama's been in there. The people in the bureaucracies are all, for the most part, people who just ignore these very, very important principles. Personally, I think we've got to change the president, and we've got to get somebody in there who respects the right of churches and the right of people who worship to worship the way they want to and to believe the way they want to and to act in accordance with their personal religious beliefs.
Senator Orrin Hatch, thank you so much for being with us and for your leadership on such an important issue.
Well, thanks to you and your organization. Your organization is one of the organizations that really makes a difference here in Washington, and I'm a big supporter.
Well, thank you, Senator.
You bet.
Well, folks, I want to encourage you to make a difference. Go to the website right now, and you can download the information and contact your senators and your congressmen and let them know that this must be resolved. And we've got the issues or the aspects of this bill that has to be covered. We've got to make sure that every American has the freedom of religion and the freedom of the rights of conscience, that they cannot be forced, and there's a way that we can make sure the government abides by the restrictions that are on them constitutionally. So go to that website right now, FRCAction.org, that's FRCAction.org, and get the information where you can contact your member of Congress.